Hallo und guten Tag, mein Name ist Tobias Goldfarb, ich bin Kinder- und Jugendbuchautor aus Berlin. Ich begrüße Sie und euch ganz herzlich zu unserem heutigen Gespräch mit dem kanadischen Jugendbuchautor Kenneth Oppel. Eigentlich wollte Kenneth Oppel sein neues Buch Bloom, über das wir gleich sprechen werden, schon im letzten Jahr bei den kanadischen Kinder- und Jugendbuchwochen in Köln im Rahmenprogramm zum kanadischen Gastlandauftritt auf der Frankfurter Buchmesse vorstellen, wozu es aber leider Corona-bedingt nicht gekommen ist. Wenn die Situation es zulässt, und danach sieht es aus, wird er in diesem Herbst nach Deutschland kommen und unter anderem bei den Buchwochen in Köln in Schulen und Bibliotheken lesen. Damit Sie und ihr Kenneth Oppel schon mal ein wenig kennenlernen könnt, werde ich gleich mit ihm ganz allgemein über seine Arbeit als Schriftsteller sprechen, vor allem aber über seine Arbeit an Bloom. Die Schüler und Schülerinnen des 9. Jahrgangs der Europaschule in Köln, die sich schon auf das Gespräch und die Lesung vorbereitet haben, haben uns spannende Fragen geschickt, die ich Kenneth auf jeden Fall auch stellen werde. Das Gespräch werden wir auf Englisch führen. Hello, Kenneth. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I am very well, and you?
Very, very well. We're all kind of recovering from an invasion, not of plants of unknown origin, but of a virus that has kind of muted everything for a while. But it looks like everything is coming back. While I was reading your book, Bloom, I had this uncanny experience of I've seen this before. There are these scenes in a supermarket when everyone is covering their faces and trying not to breathe in some evil stuff that's flying around in the air. When did you write this book?
Well, I wrote the book at least sort of 3 years before the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's eerie how many similarities there are. People have pointed them out to me. I've forgotten them, the masks and the stay-at-home orders and the the airborne allergens. But it was unfortunate. I wonder if people during a pandemic are as keen to read a book about a different kind of invasion. But like most ideas, this one sat around for many years in notebooks, and then on my computer as I wrote draft after draft of not just the first book, Bloom, but the next 2 books in the trilogy. So I had finished work on all 3 books before even the first one came out. And then shortly after the pandemic began.
And what was your original spark, your original idea to write this series of books?
It came from 2 places. The first was a single sentence that just popped into my head one day. And it went like this: there was a dead patch in the garden where nothing grew. And I like that sentence because right away it triggered more questions like, why not? What's wrong with the soil? Is it toxic? Is it cursed? Is there something buried underneath? And then an even more interesting question, which was, well, what if one day something did start to grow in this dead patch where nothing grew? And I wrote it down in my ideas notebook, and it just sat there. I couldn't figure out what kind of story it wanted to tell until a couple years later when my eldest daughter had a nightmare, and she shared it with me. And in her nightmare, she's outside and it begins to rain very heavily. And she realizes they're not raindrops, they're tiny little eggs. And they're hatching all around her, releasing terrible, creepy, crawly creatures. She's terrified. She begins to run for cover. She sees a bridge up ahead. So she runs under the bridge, only to find the biggest egg of all, which is just hatched and released the biggest, creepiest, crawly creature, which is eating another human being. So when she told me that nightmare, I thought, this is incredible. I love it. I can see it. So I took that nightmare and my sentence and smushed them together to create, not one story, but 3 about, big rainfalls that bring first seeds and then later eggs.
Your apocalypses, anyway, is much more entertaining and visually satisfying than the one we've experienced right now. In Bloom, all of your heroes are outsiders. They're outcasts. They don't fit in right from the start. Is this something you've experienced as well? Have you been some kind of weirdo when you were at that age?
Oh, absolutely. And I think every kid feels that at some point in their lives. Even the most popular, the biggest alpha personality will feel it at some point, feeling unpopular or sort of odd, on the margins of things. And that's just a very interesting character to write. Writing about someone who is very, confident and perfect is dull. So the underdog, the ugly duckling is just a very rich character to explore. And with the Bloom books, I like the idea of the ugly duckling story, a character who feels that they don't fit in, but later discovers that there's a reason for why they are the way they are, and that there's strength in their in their temperament, in their nature. Now, I just find those very satisfying stories.
This is a question from my list of questions from the school. I just mingle them with my own. Were you an avid reader as a child?
I was. I wasn't exclusively a reader of books. I liked TV a lot. Movies, I loved video games, and a role-playing game called Dungeons and Dragons, where you got to invent your own character and go on adventures, and fight orcs and goblins and dragons. But they all had a story in common, and I love the feeling of being part of a story. And pretty soon at school, I realized I like the opportunity to tell stories. So I always seem to be having a story on the go at some point, just for my own pleasure.
If you hadn't become a writer, what would you have become?
Jobless, maybe. But I probably would have tried to find some other way of telling stories. One of the things I did consider when I was younger was an architect, just because I really like drawing maps and blueprints. I just find it very satisfying imagining the spaces people are in. And to this day, I still draw maps of the settings in my books, little diagrams for myself, just to help me visualize them.
I think also maybe architecture and writing are very related. If you write and the structure is not right, the bridge collapses and everything lands before your feet. Your books seem to be very well plotted out. How much room do you leave yourself for spontaneous thoughts, for just something to happen that you haven't planned out before you start writing a book?
Well, you're right. I plan a lot before I start. I spend a long time doing outlines, roadmaps, blueprints, just because it helps me, especially in the first draft. It gives me a direction, a beginning, middle, and end. But as you say, it's best if you leave doors open for surprises and new ideas and detours, off the main route. So yes, I try and leave room. I'm quite controlling, both as a person and a writer. So it's a struggle to to be open-minded enough to let new material come in. But often when I do, it's some of the best things in the book come when you're in the act of writing, and you could not have planned them or foreseen them.
Do you run into walls in your writing process?
All the time. The the challenging thing I think about writing is everything is possible. Literally every option is available to you as a writer, and choosing the right path is agonizing sometimes, because really anything can work if you're clever enough as a writer. You can make any reaction or any decision plausible in the book. When I get stuck, what I tend to do is just jump to another part of the story, where I feel like I know a scene that I want to write. I'm excited about it, so I'll just jump. And then I might write out of order, depending on wherever I have an idea. I like that because it keeps me writing, and I don't want to lose momentum, especially in a first draft. And then later I'll just go and put it all in order, and sort of like sew it together, like Frankenstein's monster.
Let's look into your workshop a little bit. Is the room we're seeing right now, is this the room where you're writing your books?
It is. I don't usually have my my posters up. But I mean, I'm at a big desk. Here, have a look. Behind the desk is my bulletin board. So, you know, a lot of it is just pictures of my, you know, my kids, cards they've made me, but also visual references like, ooh, there's a lighthouse. That's in a new book I'm writing. And on the desk, I have things like, you know, an illustration from one of my books called Inkling, which features a graphic novelist who's blocked. I look like this a lot when I'm trying to write with my hands clutching my head. Some drawings that I had done by a botanist friend when I was writing Bloom, of what alien plants might look like. Ooh, there's the black grass, the pit plant that eat people. My notebooks, usually on my desk. As I said, you know, sometimes I sketch out little scenes. I write in bubbles a lot, just ideas that I need to connect. My own books. I have lots of books, not surprisingly. Some are my own, and some are my favorite books from childhood. A lot of people I've noticed get rid of their books when they get older, but I love my books so much. I can't imagine getting rid of the books I loved when I was a kid.
How does it work with discipline for you? Do you sit down and say, I'm writing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 words today? Or do you have bursts of creativity when you write 3 chapters and then you do 3 weeks of laziness? What's your working style?
Oh, that would be great if I had these huge bursts. I'm a sort of disciplined 1,000 words a day. I honestly find, like, if I didn't treat my job like a nine to five job, I'd probably get very little done. Just because writing is scary to me. Every day I'm a little bit scared when I start, but I find I only get the work done if I'm sitting in this chair, you know, at this desk, and I'm actually writing something. And the writing itself seems to be inspiring, and you get ideas as you write. So if I waited around to be inspired, I think I'd produce very little.
There's the idea of a writer sitting there with a glass of red wine and a candle, writing the night away. Is this you, or do you start your working day at 9 in the morning with a cup of coffee?
Yeah, the latter. It's at 9 o'clock in the morning with coffee. I mean, I would like a glass of red wine too, you know, in the afternoon. But I usually wait until I'm finished my work day. But yeah, it's being a writer is it looks very dull. In movies, you know, you see dancers, musicians, painters. When they do their work, it's very exciting. It's very visual. But a writer doing his work is the the most boring thing you can imagine. It's literally, you know, it's like that.
Do you listen to music when you're writing?
I do. Yeah. I have this gift or disability that I can't hear the lyrics, so they don't distract me. I'm very bad at hearing the words in songs. So I'll listen to, you know, anything, and it's just I just hear the you know, the rhythm and the beat and the energy in the song. So I find that I find that quite invigorating.
Do you still read in your free time?
Do I read in my free time? Oh yeah, of course. I usually have you know, a book on the go, usually at nighttime and for the weekends. So yeah, I don't know how I'd get to sleep at night without reading.
What do you like most about being a writer?
The beginning part, I still get very excited by the ideas, and getting a new idea and writing it down and thinking about it and just imagining all the, you know, the different directions it can go, all the people who might be in my story. I just find that is a very energizing part. And the idea always seems so perfect when you first get it. It seems it's going to be possibly quite easy to write, and it will just be so, you know, so wonderful. And of course, the reality is it's as hard as any other book, and you never reach that shiny perfection that you had hoped. You get close, maybe, if you're lucky.
If you could travel back in time, which writer would you like to meet?
Oh my gosh. You know, I'm gonna be difficult and say none of them, because I think I think what writers give us is the work, and and they themselves may not be particularly inspiring people or even good people, but the work is sort of something that they have created that exists independently from them. I've often met my favorite writers, living, and I find when I meet them, I'm tongue-tied. I don't know what to say because my relationship is with their book and their characters. I don't know what to ask them particularly or talk to them about. So I think I'd rather just have the books.
A lot of your work is science fiction or science fiction-esque. Now in 2021, there's a robot on Mars and we are living in the midst of a global pandemic. What does this do to a writer's mind? Would you say you process things differently?
I don't think I do, certainly not consciously. I feel like the stories I want to tell are have always existed a bit sort of out of time, or could happen, I guess, at multiple time zones. My writing doesn't tend to be very sort of topical, except for perhaps the Bloom books. I think a writer is so used to imagining outlandish possibilities, past, present, or future, that living through an extraordinary time, although it affects me personally, I'm not sure it affects the way my writer's imagination works or how I would go about thinking of my next story. I have no desire to write a story set in a pandemic, particularly, and part of that is just because my stories I consider sort of escapes in some way. I want to go somewhere different than what I have experienced or am experiencing.
Is there a genre that you haven't tried, but that you'd like to try as a writer?
I've tried quite a few. I feel like I've done animal fantasy, I've done period stuff, I've done steampunk and sci-fi, fantasy, horror maybe. I'm doing a ghost story. I haven't done a proper ghost story yet. So my next book is a ghost story set around a haunted lighthouse. I'm quite excited about that. I don't have much interest in doing contemporary, realistic story set in schools. I don't think I'd be very good at that. I didn't like school very much. So I see no reason to return to school. And also those stories, I think they date quite quickly because they're so dependent on current attitudes and fads and preoccupations. And I don't know. I think I like stories that are a little more timeless. You can enjoy them over decades rather than 1 or 2 years.
The work of a writer is not just the writing. It's also marketing, social media, book tours. Which part of the writer's life that's actually not writing do you enjoy?
I enjoy the speaking up to a point. I actually quite enjoyed the virtual visits that I've had to do over the last year and a half, because it's just so much easier, and I can be in so many different places around Canada or the United States or Germany, and it's the carbon footprint is very small. I like that. And it's just a lot more comfortable. I mean, I used to spend a lot more time in airplanes and airports and motels and cars. And it seems like a lot of time expended to get to your destination. So I like being in front of an audience. I like getting the questions from the kids, because that gives me an idea of what they're responding to most in a story and what's important to them as 12 or 13 or 14-year-olds. That's very helpful and interesting to me. The social media stuff, I suspect in 100 years we'll look back at it as like one of the worst things that's ever happened to the human race. But people seem to be doing it, so I dutifully do my tweets and my Instagram stuff. I don't know if it's helpful at all. It might be. But yeah, I'm game to do pretty much anything.
What's the strangest question you've ever been asked by a fan?
What is my net worth? I think kids imagine that writers are either very, very poor or very, very wealthy. And I think because when you read about writers, it's usually, J.K. Rowling or someone incredibly famous and wealthy. So they think you're probably wealthy. So sometimes they'll ask like very specific questions about, my worth, or totally crazy questions like how many push-ups can you do? Those are questions that sort of make me laugh. Sometimes they will ask me questions that I've never had before, which is rare. I'm trying to think of a good one. I can't.
Everybody knows that writers start making money when their books are turned into movies, but this can be something that fills your pockets but also gives you a lot of headache because your imagination is turned into something probably entirely different. How do you feel about somebody showing up and turning your books into movies? Who would you like to be in them as actors?
Oh gosh. Many of my books have been developed as movies. Silverwing was turned into an animated TV series, and it was pretty good. It's different than the book, so you reconcile yourself to the fact that there are going to be changes. It's not going to be your work exactly, but the nice thing is that the book stays the book, and the TV show or the movie is a totally different thing, and that's fine. That's as it should be. You just hope that it's being done well. I've certainly read scripts that have been written about my books where I've been quite horrified at how much they've changed and how much they've lost, in my opinion, of the book. So that's never a pleasant feeling. But overall, as a writer, I think you're just delighted at the idea of having a movie or a Netflix show made, just because it would sell so many more books, even if the movie or the TV show wasn't very good. But you have to wait. It's not something writers can do on their own. They have to wait to get approached and the film rights bought.
Staying in the realm of the visual, this is the German edition of Bloom. We can see the Canadian edition on your poster there. They look a bit different. How much can you influence the cover art of your books?
A little bit. I usually get shown artist sketches for the rough, for the cover. So I get to comment on the composition, or sometimes even the choice of the artist if they're considering, a couple artists. With Bloom in North America, I think we went through 2 different artists and dozens of possible cover ideas. It's really hard coming up with a cover that everyone likes. Sometimes mostly I'm happy with my covers. Sometimes I have not been very happy at all with the covers. I like Bloom and Hatch and Thrive. This is what the third one will look like in North America. I know they look quite different in Germany. I like the Bloom cover. It's very simple. I like simple covers that leave a lot of mystery. So these ones behind me, I like that too. It's just they're sort of they give an atmosphere more than specifics.
Let's talk more about this specific book. I'm trying not to reveal too much of what happens, but there's a threat that comes from the outside. But as a reader, I have the feeling that the actual threat is not coming from the outside, but coming from us and our exploitation of natural resources. Is there a kind of message you want to give to the readers with your work?
I'm always hesitant to talk about themes or messages because I never start with a theme or a message when I'm writing. I'm always starting with an idea, a premise, a character, a struggle. To me, as a writer, working from a message, I think, wouldn't be very helpful, or it's just not the kind of writing I would choose to do. But there's always themes in a story. It's impossible not to have themes running through your work. But I find I sort of discover them as I'm writing, and especially rewriting. And then I might, choose to amplify certain things. With Bloom, I guess the themes that emerged for me were, just change, the whole idea of change, particularly regarding teenagers, adolescents. I mean, all teenagers are going through these incredible changes, physically, mentally. In my story, Bloom, I mean, it's just exaggerated to a terrifying extent. And I guess there is a subtext of environmental urgency and disaster, and also a need for sort of cooperation and tolerance. But these are all things I prefer, my readers to find in the book. I never want to tell people what my book is about or what I wanted them to take away. There's this big word over here, the takeaway, which is, I find, the most horrifying word ever. Like a book is like a menu, and you just choose, what you want to take away from the book. Because I think the wonderful thing about books is everyone will have a different reading of the book. It would be very sad to me if everyone had exactly the same experience of a book. So I might have ideas about what my book is about, but other people might not share my opinion.
We've experienced something not quite as spectacular as the invasion of black grass, but we experienced a threat to humanity with a pandemic, and we as humans haven't shown the best kind of teamwork. It was a chance to say, let's stick together, but instead everyone put their own interests first. And teenagers have been the most affected by social distancing, remote learning. Do you think there's a story in this? Does this inspire you as a writer?
Well, it's amazing material, and I'm sure we will see many, many, many books about the effects of a lockdown and social isolation, and just the cracks that emerge in societies when it's put to a test like this. I mean, it's been very interesting to see which countries, which communities have done well, and which have done really very poorly for all sorts of different reasons. And that's, I think, been quite educational. I hope that we as people can learn from these lessons. It's not a story that I'm probably going to write, because I don't tend to write sort of overtly political stories. There's lots of people who are excellent at that, but it's great material. I can't deny it. I'll probably steal a little bit from it, but.
Would you like to tell us the title of the book you're writing right now, and when will it be published?
The book is called Ghost Light, and it will probably come out, I think, next fall. That may change a bit depending on publishing schedules. But yeah, I'm very excited about it. It's a story that's set in my city, Toronto, in a real lighthouse. It's very old. For us, on the Great Lakes, it's one of the oldest lighthouses still standing. And it is reputed to be haunted. There's quite a good ghost story attached to it. I've gotten rid of that ghost story and invented my own. But it's been a great way to write about my city and the past, and just I like more and more telling stories set where I live. It's a small country next to a big country. Canada has tended to receive a lot of stories from the United States and England, and hasn't done a great job of telling its own. So this is a chance for me to do that.
Have you finished writing, or are you still on it?
I finished a first draft, so now I have to rewrite it and make it good.
Time's running away, but there's one last question I'm sure some of those who are watching are also interested in. Do you have any kind of advice for young aspiring writers?
Yeah, I mean, none of it's terribly original or exciting, but keep one of these. Keep an ideas notebook. If you don't write your ideas down, you forget about them. And the good thing is, if you write them down, it's your space to think about them and let them grow and decide if they're good enough to become a full-length story. Lots of the things I write down just die because they're not that interesting. But the notebook is your sort of experimental laboratory to test out your ideas and write about whatever it is you want. I started off writing fan fiction. Essentially, I wrote about Star Wars. I wrote about Dungeons and Dragons. I wrote about video games. So I think wherever your energy is, that's the right place to do your writing, because you just learn different genres and what your strengths are and what your preferences are, and be patient. It will never be perfect the first try. My writing is not, even after 35 books. So, just be patient with yourself.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. We hope we can see you sometime soon in Germany. Happy writing and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you for the interview. Bye.